At the end of the world, 7 teams and 17 contestants from 6 nations took on the most desolate and unforgiving environment on the planet to compete in a race that has been 100 years in the making. In 1911, Norwegian polar explorer Roald Amundsen and British Royal Navy officer Robert Falcon Scott set out from their respective Antarctic base camps and began an epic race to be the first man ever at the South Pole. In 2012, 100 years on, 17 adventurers followed in the steps of the 2 great explorers before them. 24 days, 700 kilometers, battling the elements, 16 hours, every single day. What did this epic contest mean for Braam?
To represent South Africa to race the South Pole was a huge privilege for Pete and myself. That I said to Pete, we're not going to race it. We're not going to go and race and beat the Norwegians. They've been skiing since they were 3 years old. We skied for the first time just 8 weeks before the start. So Pete agreed with me, and we did it as what we call a race against time, because Antarctica represents 70% of the Earth's fresh water, and it is melting, and it's affecting all of us, and it's going to affect us more and more. It's known as the highest, driest, coldest, and windiest desert on Earth, the most hostile environment known to man. And long may she remain that way, because that's the only thing that keeps us out. You look out and there's just whiteness. And my instinct was to look for life. You know, a penguin or a polar bear, which you don't get here. Nothing, 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 nothing. Just flat, white, cold as far as the eye could see. And I took a little camera and I filmed Pete sitting inside with the cookers, and then I just did a 360 pan. And I may as well have stood in the same place because it was just white all the way, as far as you could see.
You know, we have very little experience compared to most of the other competitors that are here. So we are preparing as much as we possibly know that we can do for tomorrow. So definite butterflies at the moment.
The contestants set off at a blistering pace, most of them travelling further than they originally planned to.
We move for 12 hours a day, 2 15-minute, maximum 15-minute breaks. And that's just to fuel yourself, to get as much into your body kilocalories as possible in as short a time as possible.
But as they settled into their routine, the hostile racing environment and high altitude began to take their toll, with competitors from Team British Green, British Blue, Tri-Nations and the South African team all falling ill.
When I stop, I start coughing. But when I'm going, I feel like a bull.
The reality has bitten. We're not in for a cruise. We are in for a hard time. There's no doubt about it.
Braam had developed a chest infection that caused him to cough uncontrollably.
This, being here now in the tent every evening since day one, is worse, much worse than racing in the day. It just makes me really weak. So I wait for the morning and then we go.
Despite the setback, Braam and Pete undertook to assist Team British Green, in which team member Andrew had broken an arm.
We took a decision to help them get to the finish, knowing there was a very good chance that we wouldn't in fact make the cutoff. So it was quite a gamble. We carried 13 kilograms each, Pete and myself, out of Andrew's pulk.
With 3 days to go, a storm was closing in, and the race organisers had no choice but to move the cutoff forward by 1 day. This meant the South Africans and Team British Green had only 2 days in which to reach the pole, and with 62 kilometers to go, they were cutting it extremely fine.
It has literally now become for us a race against time. We've got to be there 6 a.m. on the 28th, and we're going to be there. But notwithstanding the nerves in the gut, that if a weather system hit early, what would we do then?
Andrew's injury was slowing the group down. On their own, Braam and Pete would have a fighting chance of finishing in time, but as a group, they were progressing too slowly to reach the pole by cutoff.
We didn't think it was going to be a big deal in terms of extra weight, but when you're that far into the race and suddenly you've got an extra sort of 10, 12 kilos behind you, you certainly notice it.
Braam and Pete's decision to share Andrew's load with his teammates was a laudable gesture, but would it ultimately cost the South Africans their race? If they left the other team behind, they might have been able to increase their tempo and qualify for a finish. But if they stayed together, however, their chances were very slim.
Will they make it? It's almost hour by hour. They need to up the ante, they need to be pushing the distances. They know they're behind.
But despite the pressure, both the South Africans and Team British Green forged ahead. Driven by sheer determination, they managed to cover a remarkable 57 kilometers in just a day and a half. And then, when the pole finally came into sight, it was almost unreal. 25 days earlier, these two teams were merely competitors in the most extreme race on the planet. But as they set out to complete the final stretch, they did so as brothers in arms, friends for life.
We all went to the pole together with just 90 minutes to spare in 24 days of racing. The sheer joy of finishing, we were teary. You can't really cry because everything just freezes solid. We had icicles all over our faces, you know. But just standing around the pole like that was just such an emotion, being there with our newfound friends.
Reaching the South Pole with 90 minutes to spare meant that the SA team achieved third place in the race, with the experienced Norwegians the outright winners and Wales in second place. After the South Africans' third place and Team British Green disqualified for being helped, none of the other teams made the cutoff. This was a remarkable achievement for Pete and Braam, who had only started skiing 8 weeks before the race. But if that wasn't enough, they had set themselves another task on reaching the South Pole.
I approached Natanya van Kets from the SA Mint in Pretoria, and I said to her, Natanya, no one's ever minted a coin on climate change. Why doesn't the SA Mint set the trend? And she agreed. And then I said, well, why don't we overstrike the coin at the South Pole?
And we're going to overstrike the first coins ever struck in Antarctica. What's special about them is there are only 1,000 of them, collector's medallions, and it commemorates the Scott Amundsen race 100 years ago to the South Pole, as well as the very serious problem of climate change. Pete, we put it in the die, and we turn it.
Pete and I had a small thing called a privy press, and basically the one was called Centenary and the other one Antarctica. And we then put a seal onto those coins of 90 degrees south.
Mine doesn't click. And there we have it, 90-degree mark on the coin, the South Pole.
That is a world first. And the SA Mint has challenged other countries that on Earth Hour 2013, as Earth Hour goes through Australia, they're going to strike 1,000 coins, etc., 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 starting and ending in South Africa, which I think is a fantastic gesture.
Beside these additional tasks that Braam chose to undertake, what did the Antarctic experience mean for him personally?
Antarctica is unforgiving. You've got a visor to cover your face, and everything looks orange. The sun doesn't set. It's basically fist height above the horizon, 24 hours a day going around you. And you feel that you're on another planet. It doesn't seem real. It's the most unreal environment. Having said that, it's also one of the most incredible places to have been for me, because to actually have that experience of loneliness in such a vast wilderness, it awakens something special up inside me. Coming back to South Africa, 2 days home, I went down to a restaurant in Cape Town and I was sitting there and I was overwhelmed with the noise. Cars, hooters, people, hustle and bustle. And it was like I was in the movie The Matrix. I was looking down and thinking, that was real. This world we've created here in suburbia is not real. This is so far and distant from nature that it's frightening.